Welcome everyone. Today we are diving into easements and covenants, which are two really important property law rights that shape how land can be used. Here is why this matters in practice. When you buy or use land, these rights often control what you can do or what your neighbor can do. Let's break it down step by step. An easement is basically a legal right over someone else's land. It's intangible. You can't touch it, but it's powerful. For example, if I have a right of way to cross my neighbor's driveway, that right is attached to my land and enforceable even if the neighbor sells their property. Notice how the law treats it as a real property right, binding future owners. Now here is a twist. Profit a prindery. Think of it as a cousin of an easement. Not only can you enter the land, you can take something away, such as timber, minerals, or even fishing rights. That's why it's treated differently. It's about resources, not just passage. Every easement has 4 building blocks. There must be 2 pieces of land, one gaining the benefit, which is dominant, and one bearing the burden, which is servient. The right must actually help the dominant land, not just be a personal convenience. And of course, the same person can't own both. Finally, the right must be legally recognizable. A key case here is Re Ellenborough Park, where the court allowed a communal garden right because it genuinely enhanced the property, not just provided recreation. Sometimes easements are not written down, the law implies them. Here is why this matters. Imagine buying landlocked land with no access road. The law will apply a right of way out of necessity. In Wheeldon versus Burroughs, the court said continuous and obvious uses may also be implied. But take note, the only easement you can reserve for yourself is one of necessity. This case is a turning point. Prescriptive easements reward long, uninterrupted use, like if you have used a pathway openly for around 20 years. But under Torrens title, as in McGrath versus Campbell, you cannot rely on prescription because Torrens registration is meant to provide certainty. When courts interpret easements, they don't just look at words, they look at purpose. In Westfield versus Perpetual Trustee, the court, indeed the High Court, said the intention behind the grant is critical. This shows how judges balance text with context. Easements aren't forever. They can be ended by agreement, or courts can modify them under Section 73 of the Transfer of Land Act. They can also fade away if clearly abandoned. This flexibility keeps property law practical. Now, what is a covenant? Unlike easements, these are promises written into a deed. They are contractual in nature basically, but they can still control land usage. For instance, a covenant might stop you from building above 2 stories or require you to maintain a fence. Here is why this is important. At common law, burdens don't run with the land, meaning successors are not bound. That's the rule from Osterbury. But equity carved out an exception in Tulk versus Moxhay, where they described as restrictive covenants can bind future owners if they had notice. This case shaped modern land planning. Covenants can also be passed on. So assignment under statute allows successors to enjoy benefits, and building schemes often in housing estates mean everyone agrees to a common set of restrictions, such as in Elliston versus Reacher, set out the criteria for this mutual enforcement. Finally, covenants can be wiped away by agreement or unity of ownership or by the court under section 84. In Stanhill versus Jackson, the court applied a two-limb test to see if modification was fair. This keeps covenants from being overly rigid. To wrap up, easements and covenants are the quiet forces shaping how land can be used. One gives property rights, the other enforces promises. Together they balance private ownership with community planning. Thanks for staying with me, and I will see you in the next lesson.